News Talk 1130 WISN. Welcome to the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. If you tuned in today thinking you were going to hear Mark Belling, pardon my French, but I ain't him. We're about the same height, but those are the only comparisons you're going to find. I am your guest host for today, though. I am former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. I got a couple disclaimers that I always start these shows with, no matter who I'm filling in for, and what an honor it is to sit in these chairs before this microphone and get to host these shows. The first disclaimer is that this is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. Mark Belling is a brand. Mark Belling is good at what he does. He has perfected his craft, if you will. It's been over a long period of time, and he has collected an audience of people that tune in every day, high ratings. They tune in for a reason. They want to hear his take on things. And you all are his listeners. You're not my listeners. But I have been, as I like to say, handed the keys to the Lamborghini. That's what I like in the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show brand, to a Lamborghini. And every once in a while, they give me the keys. They entrust me with the keys. They give me the latitude to give you my opinion on things without damaging the brand. I take advantage of that. So if I say anything out of line in terms of, well, Mark wouldn't say that, Mark wouldn't believe that, don't worry about it. Life's too short. Take it out on me. Don't take it out on Mark. The only restriction that Mark Belling gives me is, he says, I don't mind if you want to redline it, get out there on the edge a little bit with the Lamborghini. Just don't wrap it around a tree. Don't run it into a ditch. As long as you don't do that, I'll be fine. So he always has my word that I will not run his brand into the ditch. Other than that, you're going to hear my take on some of these things that I'm going to bring up today. That's the first disclaimer. The other thing I want to talk about, a little self-promotion here while I'm at it. You get a chance, buy and read my book, Cop Under Fire, Beyond Hashtags of Race, Crime, and Politics for a Better America. You can follow me on Parler, Parler, at Sheriff Clarke. Clarke is with an E, Clarke. I quit Twitter. I quit Twitter a long time ago. I was tired of Twitter suspending me for my speech. I will not let anybody do that to me. And it is theirs. Twitter's theirs, and they have these, what they call terms of service. And you can see now they're doing it more and more, where they're suspending people for just stuff that they just don't agree with. It has nothing to do with whether it's appropriate or not. I mean, you can't get on there and just say anything you want. But if you express a view that they don't agree with, they suspend you. And I thought, I'm not doing this. So I heard about this other site, Parler. It is growing. It's not as big as Twitter. President Trump is on there now. Many people who are associated with the president are on there now. It's grown, and I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 months. I'm closing in on 200,000 followers, which is pretty good because it's a smaller site. But it is growing. And you want some good commentary, my take on things, and I usually link it to some article or something. I don't just get on there and say, Democrats suck. I mean, there's nothing intelligent about that. So I'll find an article and I'll say, here's my take on it. So follow me on Parler, and also my website, americasheriff.com. You can go there and follow me as well. Now that we got that stuff out of the way, I'll give you the Sizzling Summer Cash Contest word. And the text word is, or text the word WIN, W-I-N, WIN, to 200-200. You'll get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info. Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. Let's see if we can get a winner. The Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. Here's where I want to start. Masks. the issue of masks as a response to this COVID-19 or coronavirus. Now that the Governor Evers, has issued an edict, an order, has no force of law, but they'd like to make you think it does. Well, you now have to wear a mask if you go outside, you're in a public place. Mandatory masks. Know this about Governor Evers. And basically, I'm talking to the audience here, but more so for the GOP, the state GOP, and the GOP and the state legislature. If Governor Evers says, I don't have the authority to do something, trust that he's going to do it. That should be a signal to you. That should make you get your ducks lined up, get your ducks in a row to contest whatever he does. If Tony Evers says, I don't have the authority to do it, trust that he's going to do it. Let me give you an example. Back in February, Governor Evers said he did not have the authority to cancel the spring election. Remember that? What did he do 2 or 3 days before the election? He canceled it. Governor Evers several weeks ago said, I do not have the authority for a statewide mask mandate. He said that. I don't have the authority. What did he do? He ordered a statewide mask mandate. Now today, actually it was yesterday, Tony Evers said, because it's been predicted that he's probably going to issue a statewide school closure. And yesterday, Tony Evers says, I have no intention on ordering schools closed. Key word in that, or the key phrase is, I have no intention. Trust that he's going to do it. Republicans in the state legislature, get your ducks in a row. A complaint I hear often about the GOP, and it's not just at the state level, but it's also at the federal level, is they move too slow. Politics has become a speed game. He who breaks out of the gate, if I can use a horse racing analogy, a fast start is important. The Democrats always seem to break out of the gate first, and the GOP ends up responding. Rarely does the GOP narrative take the lead. They wait around. So now I'm hearing the GOP now in terms of this mask mandate, which appears to be, and that's based on some legal opinions, not mine, that the governor doesn't have the authority to issue this under a national or statewide emergency because the state Supreme Court told him you're through betting on that state emergency. So he comes around again and he says, oh, the state of emergency and the cases are increasing and so on and so forth. And he throws all this crap out there. And here's what the Democrats are good with. Follow the science, they tell us. Follow the science. It's junk science, number one. And I think worse than that, it's become politicized because nothing escapes the realm of politics now. Everything that goes on in this country is viewed through the political lens. It might be political science, the science that they're talking about. It's just a platitude. But they catch a lot of people off guard. Oh, follow the science, the science. And I always say, what science? I ask them, what science are you talking about? And they'll point to, the CDC and the this and the that. They'll cherry pick some science. So here's what it's telling us. To which I always respond, wait just a minute. Because there are some counter views to that science. And here's the thing that really gets me. Within the science community, within the medical community, there is no consensus surrounding COVID-19. there are thoughts on either side by the, quote, experts. You have some scientists and some doctors that say, well, you know, I've done some studies and here's what it shows. And then you go to the other side of the argument and you'll have doctors and scientists say, well, you know, we've done some studies and here's what we see. So what you have is you have competing views. That's all you have. You have competing views. There is no consensus on most of this stuff. No consensus on, you know, should we lock down? Should we keep schools closed? Some say yes, some say no. Should we wear masks? Some say yes, some say no. How about social distancing? Some say yes, some say, and some medical experts will say maybe. So my point is it's all over the map. So when they say follow the science, that's why I say, what science? What science are you talking about? And of course, any competing argument has no chance in the public domain. They take it down off social media. They take it down off of YouTube. They squelch it so that theirs is the prevailing take on the science. What are they afraid of? Why are they afraid of a competing argument? And one of the leaders in this whole thing, as you know, has been Dr. Fauci. Folks, Dr. Fauci is a fraud. Dr. Fauci is an over-credentialed bureaucrat. He may walk around with doctor as a title. You know, someone asked him this the other day, not directly, but someone with a counter view, and they said, how many patients has Dr. Fauci examined during this COVID outbreak? That's a very good point. He doesn't practice medicine. He's the head of the National Institution of Health. I think it was on NIH. Institute, not institution. Although they should be institutionalized. National Institute of Health. He's a bureaucrat. That's all he is. He's become a political hack for the left. He's, in my opinion, he's lost all credibility. This guy came onto the scene, instilled fear in everybody, talked like he sounded like he knew what he was talking about. And, of course, oftentimes with these experts, at least that's what they call them, people are afraid to question them. Number one, because they don't have the knowledge that other person claims to possess. And number two, they don't want to sound stupid in asking a certain question. So everybody becomes afraid of trying to poke holes in Fauci's arguments or opinion. So they sit up there at these hearings, and they're all just nodding their heads in agreement when Fauci speaks, and nobody has the nerve to just ask a few questions. So they swallow this stuff whole. And the American people, especially in the early days of this virus, it was scary. There's no doubt about that. But there's a rule of thumb early on when you're dealing with a crisis. You know what that rule of thumb says? Don't make it worse. Don't make the cure worse than the disease. So what did we do? We killed the economy early on. And maybe for a couple of weeks that would have been okay. Because remember what this started out as? It had nothing to do with masks. It was flatten the curve. Bend the curve. It's just going to be for a few weeks. That's what we were told. You know what? We could have done that for 2 weeks. Then 2 weeks turned into months. 1 month turned into 2 months. 2 months into 3 months. Now here we are at the end of summer. This started like in March, February or March. Here we are in August. And now the big thing is, it's not about the curve. You know, early on, Fauci in March, I saw the clip. Fauci in March was on 60 Minutes and he said, there's no need to panic here over the coronavirus. He said, the best piece of advice, wash your hands. That was in March. We're not talking about March 2 years ago. March, just wash your hands, he said. Don't panic. while he was driving the panic bus, instilling fear, causing fear-based public policy like shutting down the economy, locking people inside their homes under house arrest. You know what we hear now? Well, we know more about it now. No, we don't. No, we do not. And if we've learned anything from it, we learned that a lot of the things that we did had repercussions. People delayed surgery. People delayed other serious medical exams and procedures. Suicides went up. Remember what I said? The rule of thumb is in a crisis, don't make it worse. But nobody paid attention to that. You know, and I say nobody. I mean, people started talking about it afterwards, but it's kind of like that's a side issue now. That the cure was worse than the disease so far. And what was Fauci? The all-knowing Fauci. What was he basing this on? The science. Modeling. These junk models that predicted 2.2 million deaths in the United States. The modeling. 100 million people would catch this virus. Modeling. And then it became, oops. And they dialed it back. Remember, though, follow the science. I attended a program at Harvard University. This is about 10 years ago. The Kennedy School of Government. And a professor there, we were talking about something one day, and we were talking about science. And he reminded the class of this, and I've never forgotten this. He said, science doesn't prove, it only probes. And yet we're told, follow the science, because, you know, we're told that it proves something. No, it doesn't. It probes into that area, comes up with some conclusions, some inconclusions, and you put it all together and you say, hey, look, you know, this is not precise, but this might be pretty close. Okay, I could deal with that. But how about the people on the other side of the argument? The same experts, the same doctors, the same scientists who say, not so fast. And here's what we found. But see, nobody had the courage within the liberal media, because Fauci became the darling of the liberal media. Nobody had the courage to poke holes in his opinions and arguments out of fear. People don't want to sound stupid, right? On national TV, all of a sudden you ask a question and people start chuckling. Oh, that's pretty stupid. People are afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that. Okay, people laugh at me. If I got a question, I'm going to ask it. And if I have a question, it's because I want to know. Well, finally the other day, somebody had the courage to tell the Emperor Fauci that he was wearing no clothes, so to speak. You know that the Emperor's new clothes? Finally. And I want you to listen to this. About 5 minutes long. I don't know if we're going to listen to the whole thing. But this is Fauci under fire. I want you to listen to this. This was a House hearing. Fauci appeared before within the last week or so. And Representative Jim Jordan was poking holes at Fauci. Listen to Fauci's reaction. The reaction says it all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, do protests increase the spread of the virus?
Do protests increase the spread of the virus?
Pause.
I think I can make a general statement.
Well, 500,000 protesters on June 6th alone.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, that number of people, does it increase the spread of the virus?
Crowding together, particularly when you're not wearing a mask, contributes to the spread of the virus.
Should we limit the protesting?
I'm not sure what you mean. How do we say limit the protesting?
Should government limit the protesting?
I don't think that's relevant to...
Well, you just said if it increases the spread of the virus. I'm just asking, should we limit it?
Well, I'm not in a position to determine what the government can do in a forceful way.
Well, you make all kinds of recommendations. You make comments on dating, on baseball, on everything you can imagine. I'm just asking you just said that protests increase the spread. I'm just asking you, should we try to limit the protests?
No, I think I would leave that to people who have more of a position to do that. I can tell you.
Government stopping people from going to church, Dr. Fauci?
Yeah.
Last week in the Calvary Chapel case, 5 liberals on the Supreme Court said it was okay for Nevada to limit church services. Justice Gorsuch said it best. He said, there's no world in which the Constitution permits Nevada to favor Caesar's Palace over Calvary Chapel. I'm just asking, is there a world where the Constitution says you can favor one First Amendment liberty, protesting, over another, practicing your faith?
I'm not favoring anybody over anybody. I'm just making a statement that's a broad statement that avoid crowds of any type, no matter where you are, because that leads to the acquisition and transmission. And I don't judge one crowd versus another crowd. When you're in a crowd, particularly if you're not wearing a mask, that induces the spread.
It's a simple question, Doctor. Should we limit the protests? Government is obviously limiting people going to church. And look, there's been no violence that I can see at church. I haven't seen people during a church service go out and harm police officers or burn buildings. But we know that, for 63 days, 9 weeks, it's been happening in Portland.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one night in Chicago, 49 officers were injured, but no limit to protests. But boy, you can't go to church on Sunday.
What was I don't know how many times I can answer that. I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm just going to tell you.
You've opined on a lot of things, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, but I've never.
This is something that directly impacts the spread of the virus, and I'm asking your position on the protest.
Yeah. I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm telling you what it is, the danger. And you can make your own conclusion about that. You should stay away from crowds, no matter where the crowds are.
Government has stopped people from going to work. In fact, just in New Jersey 4 days ago, Ian Smith, Frank Trombetta were arrested for trying to operate their business, their gym. They were arrested. But my bet is, if these two individuals who own this gym were outside just in front of their gym, and all the people who were working out in their gym were outside protesting, they'd been just fine. But because they were in the gym working out, actually running their business, they got arrested. You think that's okay?
I'm not going to opine on who gets arrested and who does not. You get where I'm going. I'm telling you, as a public health official, I say crowds.
Do you see the inconsistency, though, Dr. Fauci?
There's no inconsistency, Congressman.
So you're allowed to protest, millions of people on one day in crowds yelling, screaming, but you try to run your business, you get arrested? And if you stood right outside of that same business and protested, you wouldn't get arrested? You don't see an inconsistency there?
I don't understand what you're asking me as a public health official to opine on who should get arrested or not. That's not my position. You could ask me as much as you want.
You've advocated for certain businesses. You've advocated for certain businesses to be shut down. I'm just asking you on your position on the protest. I haven't seen one. We've heard a lot about hair salons. I haven't seen one hairstylist who, between haircuts, goes out and attacks police or sets something on fire. But we've seen all kinds of that stuff during protests, and we know the protests actually increase the spread of the virus. You've said that.
I said crowds. I didn't say specifically. I didn't say protests do anything.
So the protests don't increase the spread of the virus?
I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth.
No, I just want an answer to the question. Do the protests increase the spread of the virus?
I don't have any scientific evidence that anything I can tell you that crowds are
he doesn't have any scientific evidence.
When you don't have a mask, to increase the acquisition and transmission. No matter what.
So you don't have a position on whether the protests increase the spread of the virus or don't increase the spread of the virus?
I'm saying that crowds, wherever the crowds are, can give you an increased probability that there's going to be acquisition and transmission.
But do you understand Americans' concern? Protesting, particularly according to the Democrats, is just fine, but you can't go to work, you can't go to school, you can't go to church. There's limits placed on all three of those fundamental activities, First Amendment activities, but protesting...
Okay, that's it. Yeah. That exchange was unbelievable. You see, Fauci's not ready for prime time. Fauci under fire, he falls like a cheap suit. Did you hear him say, I have no scientific knowledge? But yet, every time this guy opens his mouth, he's telling us, follow the science. But he said You heard it. I have no scientific knowledge. And did you hear the opening of that thing? When Congressman Jordan asked him a question, there was a pause, and then Fauci repeats the question. You know what? That is a stall tactic. Fauci walked into that day not thinking. See, and this is what happens when you become this expert. You start walking around like you walk on water. You walk around thinking you know everything. You walk around thinking everybody loves you. And you see the bright lights. This guy has led a nondescript life in a very boring field, public health. But now he's prime time. The bright lights are on, and he was eating it all up because nobody told him that he wasn't wearing any clothes. Until Congressman Jordan comes along, and he did. We're going to continue this on the other side. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. News Talk 1130 WISN. Retired Sheriff David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. So before we went to the break, we listened to that exchange between Congressman Jim Jordan and Dr. Fauci. And I found it it was very entertaining, but you know, Jordan's pretty good. I know Jim Jordan, met him numerous times. He's one of the more conservative House members. If the GOP were ever to win the House back, I'd like to see Jim Jordan as Speaker, but that's not how that works in that very hierarchical. And both the GOP and the Democrats, you know, Kevin McCarthy's a minority leader, but I am very disappointed in Kevin McCarthy for what that's worth. Anyway, so as Fauci said before then, and here's another thing. Now, and I was just looking up at the TV set here, and now Fauci's saying, well, he's got some concerns about opening schools. You know, a couple weeks ago, he said, no, we got to open schools up. He says, you know, we look and these young folks are not at risk, and there's some other precautions we can do to open schools. Now, today, he's saying, well, I got some big concerns. You see why I said he's a political hack? There are very few doctors that I would say this about because of their field of study and how long it takes to get through medical school. And you can't get through medical school being stupid. But Fauci's a goof. And it's about time. This country would be better off if we never heard from Fauci or Deborah Birx again. Fauci owes the United States, the people of the United States, an apology. His decisions, his panic has destroyed lives. He destroyed the American economy. He destroyed jobs. People have lost jobs. Businesses that will never open again because of Fauci's wisdom about the spread of coronavirus. I'm beginning to think Fauci doesn't know much more about this thing than I do, and the only thing I know is about what I read about it, and I read a lot. I do my own research. I don't watch that idiot box TV and is that okay? No, I go to the internet and I fish around. I read studies on both sides. Speaking of the science, I've come up with some competing evidence. Fauci says follow the science, so I do. Here's a study done by two doctors. One is Dr. Brousseau, a national expert on respiratory protection and infectious diseases. The other is Dr. Sietsema, also an expert on respiratory protection and an assistant professor at the University of Chicago. University of Illinois at Chicago. And here's the title of it, because we got to follow the science, right? On masks. And this is all, follow what I'm doing here with Governor Evers' edict about mandatory masks, because that's what we're on now. We're no longer on just wash your hands. We're no longer on bending curves. We're no longer on stay locked in your house. It's now masks. So this article by these two doctors is entitled Masks for All for COVID, Not Based on Sound Data. Yet Evers the other day said it was. In response to the stream of misinformation and misunderstanding about the nature and role of masks and respirators as source control or personal protective equipment, PPE, we critically review the topic to inform ongoing COVID-19 decision-making that relies on science-based data and professional expertise. Fauci calls anybody who doesn't agree with him, by the way, a distraction. When Fauci's asked, well, hey, we got some medical experts over here that's it's just a distraction. Well, I'd have to see their data. But no one asked him to see his data. Back to the story. As noted in a previous commentary, the limited data we have for COVID strongly supported the possibility that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is transmitted by inhalation of both droplets and aerosols near the source. It is also likely that people who are pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic through the duration of their infection are spreading the disease in this way. We do not recommend requiring the general public who do not have symptoms of COVID-like illnesses to routinely wear cloth or surgical masks because, number one, there is no scientific evidence. Remember, told follow the science. There is no scientific evidence that they are effective in reducing the risk of SARS-CoV-2 transmission. Number two, their use may result in those wearing the mask to relax other distancing efforts because they have a sense of protection. Number three, we need to preserve the supply of surgical masks for at-risk healthcare workers. Sweeping mask recommendations, as many have proposed, will not reduce SARS-CoV-2 transmission, as evidenced by the widespread practice of wearing such masks in Hubei province, China, before and during its mass COVID transmission experience early this year. Our review of relevant studies indicates that cloth masks will be ineffective at preventing SARS-CoV-2 transmission, whether worn as source control or as PPE. Respirators, though, are the only option that can ensure protection for frontline workers dealing with COVID-19 cases once all of the strategies for optimizing respirator supply have been implemented. Now, when we talk about respirators, they're talking about the N95 masks. Now it says, we do not know whether respirators are an effective intervention as source control for the public. A non-fitted test respirator may not offer any better protection than a surgical mask. Let me stop there for a minute. How many people do you know are wearing a fit-tested N95 respirator mask? This thing has turned into an industry. You have designer ones, because now, you got to look good, you got to look cool. But what they're saying in this here with the study is the N95 respirator might, under certain circumstances, most people don't have one of these. It's something they bought online, or they bought it at Costco or Walmart or Sam's Club. They throw it on their face and they think they're being protected. So back to the story. It says a non-fitted test respirator may not offer any better protection than a surgical mask. Respirators work as PPE only when they are the right size and have been fit tested to demonstrate they achieve an adequate protection factor. In a time when respirator supplies are limited, we should be saving them for frontline workers to prevent infection and remain in their jobs. In sum, wearing surgical masks in households appear to have a very limited impact on transmission of respiratory diseases. One possible reason may be that masks are not likely worn continuously in households. These data suggest that surgical masks worn by the public will have no or very low impact on disease transmission during a pandemic. Cloth masks are ineffective as source control and PPE. Surgical masks may have some role to play in preventing emissions from infected patients, and respirators are the best choice for protecting healthcare and other frontline workers, but not recommended for source control. These recommendations apply to pandemic and non-pandemic situations. Leaving aside the fact that they are ineffective, telling the public to wear cloth or a surgical mask could be interpreted by some to mean that people are safe to stop isolating at home. Masks may confuse that message and give people a false sense of security. If masks had been the solution in Asia, shouldn't they have stopped the pandemic before it spread it elsewhere? Again, 2 infectious diseases experts on masks, Governor Evers. You said follow the science. Here's some science, Dr. Fauci. So do you want me to follow that science, or do you want me to follow your expert or your experts' opinions on the wearing of masks and whether it helps control and prevent the spread of COVID-19? Which one? And here's the problem for me. Because there's no consensus in the medical field, in the scientific field, you have some on one side saying this and some on one side saying that. You know, that's usually what happens. We don't know. There's competing evidence. There's different opinions on this stuff, and I respect that. But then it should be up to me. If I want to wear a mask, fine. If I don't want to wear a mask, fine. And that's why I say it's a rights issue. Give me the information. There is no general consensus. So let me decide. Governor Evers. It's a rights issue. It's not a medical issue. It's not a public health issue. You'll say it is, but that's a lie. I know it's a lie. Because I read and I find these things out for myself. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. We take a break. News Talk 1130 WISN. You're listening to the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. I'm your guest host for today, former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. Another aspect here of this follow the science. You know, and as I said, I need to say this again. Nothing about the science has changed. The only thing that has changed is the politics. And that's why I pointed out with Fauci, a month ago, saying we got to get kids back into school. I heard him say that. The science shows that they're not a high-risk group. We could do this safely. And now today he's saying, well, I got some problems with opening up schools. See, the science didn't change there. The politics changed. So here's some more evidence that it's the politics that is driving this and not the science. Here's a story. It says, declining coronavirus case fatality rate in U.S. renews questions on the merits of the lockdowns. I'm not going to go into this story, but the lockdowns were a disaster. And I don't mean from the standpoint of how it damaged the economy. I'm talking about as a public policy decision. Here's another story that says U.S. reports smallest daily coronavirus cases increase in almost 4 weeks. This is from August 3rd, yesterday. You won't hear that in the liberal media. They're still peddling fear. They're still peddling propaganda. I want to talk a little bit about the data, the truth and lies about coronavirus has come from. The author is a doctor, Dr. David Williams. One of the truths He says it's now almost impossible for anyone in the general public or general medical community to know the actual number of deaths from COVID-19. That is because sometime in March, U.S. hospitals started testing all ER patients, and every patient who died, regardless of the cause of death, they were listed as COVID deaths. Those patients are being included by the media in the COVID-19 death tolls. Yes, a victim of a car accident brought to a U.S. emergency room who passes away will be tested for COVID-19. Don't ask me why, but they do. Two of the most egregious examples of misrepresentation involve infants. One of the fascinating things about coronavirus is, from a medical standpoint, is children are almost universally immune to coronavirus effects. Yet we're having this big argument about, should we close schools, keep schools closed, or should we open schools? I have a take on that. Should we keep schools closed? Should we open schools? I think there's an opportunity here that's being missed. First of all, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk about that. News Talk 1130 WISN. Sheriff Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. News Talk 1130 WISN. Former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. Let's start off the top of the hour giving you the sizzling Summer Cash Contest word. Text the word CHECK, CHECK, to 200-200. You get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info. Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. Let's see if we can get a winner. You know, one of the things that has really started to get under my skin is the fact that we're so willing to comply with the government trampling our rights, restricting our rights under this guise of coronavirus and public health and public safety. And we just seem so willing to comply and go along with it. Acquiesce is what I like to say. Well, you know, it's probably for the best. Well, if we only save one life. Well, out of an abundance of caution. Well, what's it going to hurt? Those are phrases of resignation. To me, the mask is the new lockdown. Government intruding on our rights, telling us we have to wear something now. You know, there was a time in this country where, and still exists, where the government can do that sort of thing with people who are sick with a communicable disease. In other words, you have some communicable disease that's easily spread. They can order you quarantine in your house. If you leave your house, you can get arrested. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with telling healthy people, otherwise healthy people, that you have to do a certain thing. If you want to take people who have tested positive for COVID, tell them to wear a mask so they don't spread it, that's not unreasonable. For a couple weeks, right? Isn't that the about a 2-week period of time before it runs its course? That's okay. I'm willing to do that. I am not willing to have a governor or anybody tell an entire population, not on the basis of science, on the basis of politics, well, you have to wear a mask. Some people will say, well, what's the big deal? What's it going to hurt? It's a rights issue. I don't want my rights infringed upon by any level of government unnecessarily. You think it's going to end with COVID? You know, the left comes at us every day over our Second Amendment. Now they're attacking us over our First Amendment, limited, infringing our First Amendment rights. You see what I mean when I say this won't stop? We don't seem to have the will to want to fight. I don't say push back anymore. I say shove back. Push is not aggressive enough. We're to the point where we got to shove government back and say, get back in your place. Well, we don't seem to have the will. Here's an article here. Thousands march in Berlin to protest coronavirus curbs. Berlin, Germany. 20,000 people showed up on Saturday. 20,000 people to protest government's coronavirus curbs. Our side couldn't get 20,000 people to anything other than a Trump rally. I've been to several protest rallies, some in the state, some outstate, several in Michigan. On a good day, 1,500 will show up. That's huge. I was at a Support the Police rally in Kenosha, 500, which was pretty good because you had it organized by a woman who didn't have a lot of experience with this and didn't have a lot of time. And, you know, we were able to cobble something together and got 500 to show up. And that's pretty good on short notice like that. 20,000 people in Berlin, Germany turn out to shove back against governments trampling their rights. I want to read some of this from this story here. Thousands of demonstrators rallied in Berlin on Saturday to protest against measures imposed to stem the pandemic, saying they violated people's rights and freedoms. The loose gathering, estimated by police to be between 15 and 20,000, included libertarians, constitutional loyalists, and skeptics of the science behind policies to fight the pandemic. You would think this happened in the United States of America, reading some of this. Protesters danced and sang, "We are free people," to the tune of the rock band Queen's "We Will Rock You." Others marched with placards saying, "We are making a noise because you are stealing our freedom." Some also said signs, "Don't wear a mask." The protests followed a rallying cry from Michael Ballweg, an entrepreneur and political outsider who has organized similar rallies in Stuttgart and is running to become mayor of a southwestern city. "Our demand is to return to democracy," said one protester. "The mask that enslaves us must go." He, like most of the other protesters, were not wearing a mask. Germany has been less severely hit than some other European countries. And it goes on to give the data, how many infected, so on and so forth. Most people have respected measures that include wearing masks in shops, while the government has just imposed mandatory tests for holiday makers returning from high-risk areas. But a vocal minority is chafing against the restrictions, saying they are crushing diversity of thought and doing untold social and economic harm. See what I mean when I say you would have thought this event happened in the United States? Where's our shove back? Here's a quote here. "Only a few scientists around the world who follow the government's lead are heard," said protesters Peter Kahns. "Those who hold different views are silenced, censored, and discredited as defenders of conspiracy theories." Same thing happening in Berlin, Germany, that are happening here in the United States. But they got 20,000 people to show up. I'd be willing to bet if I announced a protest rally next week to protest Governor Evers' edict of ordering mandatory masks, I bet I couldn't get 2,000 people there. I bet I couldn't get 1,000 people. Where are you? The more we lay down, the more that we put up with this, the more that we're going to get. That's how government works. Let's see what we can get away with, they say. How much will the people take before they revolt? And they're constantly measuring the temperature. The more protests, the more noise we make, they start to listen. They start to get scared. Why do you think all of these things being done by the left right now with these riots, you know what they call them, protests, these riots all across the country are effective? They got government officials scared to do anything about it, including police. We're going to get into that in a little bit. police response or non-response to what's going on in the streets. And the streets are the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't pick the battlefield. We didn't pick the rules of engagement. The left did, because we let them. They decided they were going to take it to the streets. If we're going to engage this enemy, and they are an enemy, if we're going to engage this enemy, we're going to have to go to the streets to do it. I sit up here and I'm shocked when I hear that somebody is trying to have a protest rally and they're being told by government or law enforcement, well, you better not do that because we don't know if we can keep you safe and we don't think that's a good idea and it might be a danger. They have never said that to Black Lives Matters. Yes, L-I-C-E, vermin. They have never told Black Lives Matter, well, we don't think you should have that. We think it's going to be unsafe. We don't know if we can protect you. They have never said that because they're afraid. But they're not afraid of us. And so people back down. Well, I was going to have a rally, but I was told that I couldn't and blah, blah, blah. And should have had it anyway. That's shoved back. Well, I'll tell you what. Police department, you have a duty to protect us in this public square. As we exercise our First Amendment right, you have a duty. You better be there. That's the response. Not, oh, well, we don't want to cause any trouble. Well, what if the other side shows up? Because when I was in Kenosha at that Support the Police rally, Black Lives Matter did show up. We had about 500. They had about 30. Guess what? They were outnumbered. And they tried to push their way in. This was in a public park right across from the courthouse. Guess what? We shoved back. I was proud of that group that day. They weren't going to put up with that crap from those agitators who tried to interfere with our right, our First Amendment right to have a protest and a support rally. But I told the organizer, too, I said, don't call it a rally, call it a protest. Dare the police to say, well, we don't think you should exercise your First Amendment right. You know what happened after about 5 minutes? The police were there. Police did an outstanding job of keeping the peace. That's their job, to stand in between and don't let the two groups come together. And I said that to one officer, once the pushing and shoving started, I said, officer, you better get them out of here because we aren't stepping back. And the officer said to me, he knew who I was. I mean, he knew I was former sheriff, and he said, yes, sir. And they started to push him back. For their own safety, not ours, for their safety. The police ended up saving them that day because we weren't going to put up with that crap. And that's the attitude that we have to have. We're not putting up with your crap. Leads me into another area. Well, let me do this before we move on to the police response. Here's what commitment is. You heard Congressman, if you started off the show listening, you heard Congressman Jim Jordan talk about a couple of gym owners in New Jersey that they can't open their gym, but yet, you know, everybody else can have their big riots. This is a story about those two gym owners. He even named them in his effective attack on Fauci. New Jersey gym owners squaring off with Governor Murphy kicked down the barricades at the entrance. Gym owners are fighting back against shutdown order amid pandemic. A state judge ruled that New Jersey authorities can shut down a gym that defied closure. Attila's Gym co-owners Ian Smith and Frank Trumbetti share their story. The owner of this gym in New Jersey reopened on Saturday by kicking down the wooden barricades authority used to block their entrance amid coronavirus restrictions. Co-owner Smith posted a video of himself and his business partner kicking the barriers and entering as a crowd cheered their decision. You see what I mean? You have to build a critical mass. Every time somebody wants to do this, a business, You need hundreds, if not thousands, of us there, a critical mass of people to stand in the way of government trying to come in. They ended up changing the locks on this guy's place. Had there been 2, 3, 4, 500, 1,000 people standing around the door, the government couldn't have changed the locks. The dramatic display indicated that the month-long standoff between Governor Murphy and gym owners wasn't finished. Smith's caption contained a defiant message for New Jersey Governor Murphy. Quote, "You will not trample on our rights, and you will not destroy our lives. We will not back down, ever." Smith added, quote, "Please share this to show what lengths we have to go to just to make a living for our families. The gym owner story has become a symbol of American business owners' frustration with authorities blocking their livelihoods during the pandemic. Some, like Trombetti and Smith, have been arrested or fined for attempting to reopen despite shutdowns of their respective jurisdictions." Ladies and gentlemen, that is commitment. I often ask, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do about this? These two guys were willing to go to jail. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but if there are 1,000 of us there, you think they can arrest 1,000 people? You think they would try to arrest 1,000 people? Smith and Trombetti were arrested on Monday after they defied a court order, allowing authorities to shut down their businesses. By Friday, Smith had apparently been released as he posted a video of himself announcing his decision to knock down the wooden barriers. New Jersey authorities, he said, erected those barriers after he and others removed the doors from their hinges in order to prevent the state from once again changing the locks. Determination. Quote, "Tyrants use force to exercise their will, threat of imprisonment, financial ruin, and more," Smith wrote on Instagram. He also said, "You will not tread on my rights. You will not ruin everything we've worked for our whole lives, and you will be held responsible for your trespasses." Hashtag lions, not sheep. We have too many sheep on our side. You think they can do this behind a keyboard, calling into talk radio? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. That ain't where the battlefield is, folks. It's in the streets. So you have to do both. You can call and you can communicate your experience and your frustration. That's fine, but that's not going to get it done. You have to be willing to go to the streets. When you hear these things are going on, you have to go in. You got to sign up. You can't sit this one out. This is not going away. Don't sit around waiting for November. We don't have time for that. We're losing our rights by the day. This isn't about elections anymore. The left has made that clear. They do not care about elections. If they don't win, the election doesn't matter. It doesn't count. They'll delegitimize it and they'll say to hell with it anyway. And they'll push through. We got to shove them back. And if we're not willing to do that, I don't want to hear any whining. Whining is not an effective counter tactic to what they're doing. Reminds me of an article that I penned. My gosh, this is like 4 years ago. 2 years ago, I'm sorry. December of 2018. Wanted new conservative fighters. I've read this before, but I think I should read it again. It's a rally cry. Let me be blunt. It's obvious to me that the political right needs a fighting force, an organized ground-level force built for the political conflicts of the 21st century. Politics has become a contact sport. This force must be unlike many GOP political figures who want to avoid contact and seem obsessed with being admired by the left and the editorial boards of the New York Times and CNN rather than pushing back. Now, I said pushing back 2 years ago. I said it's shoved back now. Then pushing back against the people seeking to destroy them. Who was it that said you can't fix stupid? The left, aided by the liberal media, has declared war on conservatives. They have declared war on cops, the Constitution, the rule of law, due process, religion, and free speech. To counter this, we need political street fighters, brawlers to help President Trump push back against the swamp, the deep state, never-Trumpers on the right, and the Washington establishment. Currently, Trump has to rely on a group of your grandfather's Republicans who mistakenly believe that you can compromise with the left or that you can win at political warfare from inside the safe space of a think tank, a TV studio, or from a D.C. cocktail party. Traditional GOP politicians and elites do not realize that going forward into the 2020 elections, the tactics that they are currently using that had previously worked to win elections have become obsolete and ineffective at countering the guerrilla-type warfare tactics of the Democrat Party and the American left. Somebody needs to tell these Republican intellectual elites that the other side is shooting at us, figuratively and literally, as in the case of Congressman Steve Scalise. In this new age of political warfare, they have allowed the left to dictate the rules of engagement. In turn, the left has turned politics into the art of lying. They control the language that can be used and thus control the narrative. Anyone who thinks the left will play fair or use traditional methods to win debates or election is dangerously naive. These political ambushes are the metaphorical equivalent of a roadside IED. Often you won't know the left's blast is coming until it's too late in the election cycle when their 11th hour surprise smears or outright lies appear. Recall when former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said that 2012 GOP presidential nominee Mitt Romney didn't pay his taxes for 10 years. After the election, when Reid was confronted about the outright lie, he smugly responded, "It worked, didn't it?" Everyone should be awake to the predictable left. Their opposition research digs deep into a candidate's past, finding some innocuous, clumsy statement, photo, or connection, even if it was decades ago, and smears them with it as if it happened yesterday. They recently did it to Cindy Hyde-Smith in her U.S. Senate race, as the Democrats engage in their insidious game of identity politics. Cindy Hyde-Smith was in some museum down in Mississippi, and she put on a Confederate soldier's hat and took a picture. They tried to smear her with that as if she's some racist. I know Cindy Hyde-Smith. She's far distinct from being a racist. Back to my column here. Who's behind us? A few culprits are Media Matters, American Bridge, Crew, and Share Blue. These are subversive leftist groups running a well-funded and organized Trump resistance movement. They are purveyors of misinformation and propaganda. They have made it clear that elections will no longer matter unless they win. When they lose, they demand recounts. They claim voter suppression, and suspicious, uncounted ballots will magically appear. Media Matters operative David Brock said in a confidential memo that we will fight every day. We're going to resist the normalization of Donald Trump. We're going to contest every effort. In a training manual, Share Blue proclaimed that Trump allies would be forced to step down or change course due to news published by Share Blue. They organize boycotts and threaten corporations into not doing business with conservative groups. They conduct training courses on how to write letters and flood newspaper publishers to stop counter-view op-eds from being published in liberal publications. Remember that one from Tom Cotton in the New York Times? The New York Times took down. Ladies and gentlemen, I wrote this in 2018. Back to the column. They attack conservatives on social media sites like Facebook and Twitter and flood their administrators with complaints to get them shut down or suspended. I can't believe I wrote this in 2018. I could have wrote this last week, but I wrote it in because I know these people. I know them. I know their tactics. I know their strategies. And they have to be confronted. Back to the column. These are the leftist bullies that can, at a moment's notice, summon a mob of people to show up and raise hell. They were behind the smearing of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. They were the ones who were pounding on the doors of the U.S. Supreme Court trying to storm the gates. They engage in political violence, throw out false allegations of sexual assault or harassment, and race baiting along with other types of physical threats, physical violence, and property damage. They are undoubtedly behind the assaults against Republican elected officials and White House staff in public places like restaurants and at their homes. These leftist groups are a formidable foe, and that the conservative side currently has no response. We need infrastructure, and we need to mobilize it quickly. I want to be clear. I do not advocate for violence, but I do advocate for more effective counter-tactics than the weak-kneed ones currently deployed. This new conservative fighter has to rid themselves of their self-righteousness about the kind of tactics they will have to use to take on the left's machine. For instance, taking the high road is an ineffective tactic against this foe as merely as expressing outrage. Proving that we are better than they are is useless. Besides, I already know I'm better than they are, and I don't have to prove that to anybody. This new political fighter has to be able to fight through whatever the left throws at them and not flinch, apologize, grovel, or abandon a conservative or GOP candidate after an opposition research sneak attack. Think Trump supporter. They have to snicker at being called racist, homophobe, misogynist, Islamophobe, and fight on. In other words, when the left metaphorically throws rocks, the new conservative fighter has to be willing to pick up those rocks and throw them right back. If you need an example, just watch how President Trump fearlessly takes on the left. I know many on the conservative side do not have the stomach for this. My response is, then get used to losing elections. Get used to gun confiscation. Get used to government control over every aspect of your life. Get ready for totalitarian fascism. You can stop it if you dare to change tactics and move to the front. Again, I wrote that. It was in townhall.com in December of 2018. Everything in there 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago, is apropos to today. Everything. I saw it coming. So here we are. We got to take a break. Retired Sheriff David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. News Talk 1130 WISN. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. I was looking up at the TV here, and there's a segment. And it says, murder rates climbing in big cities. Yeah, no kidding. What do they say? No blank Sherlock. People are wondering why, and it's the usual nonsense. What can we do? What can we do to get your foot off the neck of the American police officer and let him get up off the ground and go back to work? That's what you can do about it. I want to move into that area of policing, or the lack of, going on in many major cities across America to the detriment of the law-abiding community. And this is what happens. You've heard me say this. Been talking about this all my years as sheriff. The social order will collapse unless you have assertive, aggressive, effective policing. The social order will collapse. And it is collapsing before our eyes. New York, Milwaukee, Seattle, Portland, and Chicago, which is right down the road from us. In Chicago to date, since Memorial Day weekend, and this is just a weekend count, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, not weekday, in the city of Chicago since Memorial Day, the weekend violence, 647 people have been shot, leaving 130 dead. Street violence, just the weekends, in the city of Chicago. Think about that. 647 people shot, 130 dead. Where's the outrage? Where's Black Lives Matter? Ineffective leadership, failed leadership is at the heart of it. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Good leadership or bad leadership. Bad leadership is going to fall. Good leadership is going to rise. You have this inept mayor in the city of Chicago who sat up there a couple weeks ago in relation to the violence and blamed the gun. She dragged out her Democrat anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment talking points and started reading from it. We need more gun control, she said. No. And I was asked about this. By the way, one of the things I forgot to mention is I'm a contributor to Newsmax TV. I'm on there frequently, easily 3, 4, 5 times a week on one of the many shows they've taken me on. And we talk about these things. Newsmax TV is the fastest growing news cable network in America. I didn't say the largest. That's Fox. But I said the fastest growing. So check me out on Newsmax TV. Anyway, I reminded the mayor that, you know what, the gun ownership spread across the state of Illinois. You're only going to find the street violence in one segment. That's the black underclass, the ghetto, the black community. You can go out to the rest of that state and take a survey of all the gun owners and tell me where you're going to find that kind of street violence. If it's the gun, then the violence should be distributed throughout the entire state. And it's not. It's the same in Milwaukee. In any other place that is experiencing an increase in street violence, it's the black underclass. Everyone's afraid to say that, though. The Dems just won't admit it. The people on our side are afraid to say it. It's the black underclass. I didn't say the entire black community, the black underclass. They're responsible for most of the street violence. Then you take the failed liberal policies like no bail, no arrests for misdemeanors, opening up jails and letting career criminals back out onto the street. You put all that in a bowl and mix it up, and you're wondering, I don't mean you, on TV here, they're wondering what's causing the rise in street violence and murders in these cities. Failed urban policy. Shootings up 200% in New York. In once thriving areas. And you wonder how this can happen. Then you have the police on their heels. The police just doing the bare minimum. I'm not being critical. I don't blame them. Here's a choice for the American police officer. I go to work today. I could either defend myself if I have to from serious injury or death, and if I do, I might be looking at a murder charge. What the hell kind of choice is that? But that's what they're facing. You can't blame them for doing the bare minimum. I think it's extremely unfortunate for the law-abiding community that might need them. You know, I remember Mark Belling talking last week about an incident, I think it was Greenfield, where these marauders, these insurrectionists, these riot starters appeared at some residence in Greenfield because they had a "We Back the Badge" sign in their front yard. And they stood there taunting the neighbor or the owner of the house, who came out and an argument ensued. They called 911. You know what they were told? Well, we're monitoring the situation. And I thought, what the hell is that? We're monitoring the situation. From where? Well, no, we're not going to send anybody. We're going to monitor the situation. The number one objective of a law enforcement officer is to keep the peace. Law and order. Keep the peace. So you have armed individuals that show up. They're exercising their Second Amendment right. But the homeowner could do it too. But now you have the potential for conflict. And that's why you need the police there. To keep the peace, not monitor the situation from a 911 operator. I thought, is this what local policing has come to? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. 647 shot, 130 dead, and weekend violence since Memorial Day in Chicago. And I know Milwaukee's homicide rate is up too. These numbers are staggering. Nothing from Barrett, in the Milwaukee violence, because his elections of last year, so he's safe now for another 4 years. That's ineffective leadership. Police chief under fire for no reason. This is ass backwards. Instead of attacking the criminals and going after the criminals, they're going after the police.
Yeah,
News Talk 1130 WISN. Former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. An ironic story before we went to the break. I was talking about Chicago. An ironic story here. News story. Teen who rallied to remove police from Chicago schools is tragically shot to death. You know, I talk about the underclass crime. It's driving us, the cultural rot, the cultural dysfunction within the black underclass is leading all of this street violence where you settle disputes by force, you take property by force, you intimidate your neighbors. Calabrita, 17-year-old student activist from Mather High School in Chicago, was found shot in the head on Friday. Teen's death comes just weeks after he publicly called for the district to remove police officers from schools. Let me stop there. I don't believe police should be in schools. Never did. Matter of fact, when I first became sheriff, one of the first things I did was I took the deputy I had that was working in suburban schools out. I based it on research, not an emotional reaction, and he was involved in the GREAT program, gang reduction and education, whatever. It's called a GREAT program. And there was a study that I read that came out that said that that was ineffective in stemming gang involvement and drug use by high schools. So that's why I made the decision. I said, I need cops on the streets. You know, many probably in this audience, your experience in schools, no matter where the school was, you didn't have cops, so you didn't need them. The teachers were in charge. The principals were in charge. You had intact families. And you used those tools to deal with student behavior. I know it's different now. I understand it. These kids come to work, come to school, not in a state of readiness to learn, dysfunctional homes. They're screwed up in the head. They come in with all this psychological baggage. I understand it. Teachers being battered, I understand it. But you know what? These people want to be teachers. Figure it out. The only time the cop should be there is if a crime is committed. Okay? It's just, you might feel different. That's fine. But a lot of the time, oftentimes I should say that, you know, the cop has to interact with some kid and has to use force, and the next thing you know, the cop's in trouble. Oh, he threw the kid down. Oh, he did, you know, all that. No, you guys, you do it. You do it. See how easy it is. Get a social. All these schools have social workers. What are they doing? Tell them to utilize their education and deal with the behavior problems. Call the parents. Get the parents to school. Hey, this kid did this today. Start cursing the teacher out. Anyway, back to the story of this kid. 17 years old, and you know, he wanted no cops in schools. Okay, but anyway, no suspect named here. It says, just weeks ago, Reed spoke at a Board of Education meeting in support of removing police from the district. During the meeting, he recalled his own experiences with officers in his school. He says, one thing I'm here to say is I'm proud to be a black young man, the teen activist said. It's not a good feeling to be labeled as dangerous or criminal, because we're not. Oh, really? No, not all of them. The underclass. No black person should ever feel like this. You're right. He's right. They shouldn't feel like that. Shouldn't have to feel like that. But the reality is, most of this street violence is done by black perpetrators. There's ample data to prove that. So it goes on to say, you know, this guy was, and he seemed like a decent guy, but he ends up on the street with a bullet in the head. You think a white guy did that? Chicago's a hot mess, ladies and gentlemen. So are some of these other cities. Seattle, poor leadership. Start at the top. Mayor, poor leadership, ineffective leadership. And it just starts to fall apart as you go on. We're going to get into Minneapolis coming back from the break. News Talk 1130 WISN. News Talk 1130 WISN. You're listening to the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. I'm your guest host for today, former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. Let's start off the hour giving you the sizzling summer cash contest word. Text the word HAPPY, HAPPY, to 200-200. You'll get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio information. Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. Good luck with that. Before we went to the break, we were talking about the violence in Chicago and some of these other major cities that is on the rise. And I mean like exponentially, not like a couple. Does anybody know who Devell Gardner is? Does that name sound familiar? Devell Gardner. How about George Floyd? How about Eric Garner? How about Freddie Gray? How about Trayvon Martin? Very few people, if any, know who Devell Gardner is. Devell Gardner is a 1-year-old. Several weeks ago in New York, a 1-year-old sitting in a baby stroller at a family barbecue shot in the stomach and killed. A 1-year-old shot in the stomach sitting in a baby stroller at a family barbecue in a drive-by shooting in New York. I believe they have somebody in custody by now. I saw a couple follow-up stories. Black perpetrator. No police involved in the shooting. No outrage, the usual stuff. The memorials and the violence and, the stuff that's ineffective. People are frustrated. They don't know what to do. I know what to do. But they're being led by goofs like Bill de Blasio and Lori Lightfoot in Chicago and a guy named Wheeler in Portland and I can't remember the Seattle. Durkin, Seattle. I'm going to read some things that part of a speech I gave on support for police several weeks ago. I kind of use this as a framework whenever I talk at support for police events. This is part of it. The elephant in the room is not policing. It's the cultural rot and dysfunction that occurs in the ghetto all across America. It's things like ineffective parenting and in some cases no parenting at all. It's things like absent fathers, women having multiple children from different men leading to child abuse and child neglect. It's things like school failure and questionable lifestyle choices like joining gangs along with criminal behavior and drug use. Well, that's the hard stuff for politicians. Ghetto reform can start by holding up a mirror to the black underclass and demand that they adopt better lifestyle choices. Then we won't need so much policing in these areas. But it's easier to go after the cops. After all, they're the low-hanging fruit. If we need a national discussion in America, it is to talk about the ugly reality of why so many black males choose criminality instead of leading a more mainstream lifestyle. We need to ask why 53% of all known homicide suspects are black males, and why 60% of all known robbery suspects are black males, and black males make up only 13% of the population. Yes, let's have that conversation. Policing doesn't need to be reformed. The ghetto needs to be reformed. Changes in behavior and lifestyle of the underclass was what needs to be reformed. But that's the hard stuff for politicians whose failed policy caused most of the conditions that require more policing. Policies like releasing career violent criminals from jails and prisons, another stupid policy. All of this is then thrown into the lap of a police officer and you expect miracles. And when things go awry through no fault of the police, the cop haters demand change. The biggest threat to law-abiding people in the ghetto is not a police officer. It's a stray bullet from a criminal indiscriminately shooting up the neighborhood. I had Devell Gardner in mind when I wrote that. And I did write that after his homicide. Let's move to Minneapolis. Another hot mess. Another failed mayor, Mayor Fry. Here's a story from Fox News. When I read this, I had to get up. What do they say when you're really angry? You get up and you walk it off. I think that's what they say, right? So I read the story about Minneapolis, and it says Minneapolis police police offer advice on how to stay safe amid crime surge. Give up your cell phone. It's like the Wild Wild West, said Vine Church pastor Steve Carlise tells Tucker Carlson on Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Minneapolis Police Department, which has seen 40 cops resign and be fired in the past 2 months, offers city residents some tips on how to deal with the city's recent surge in violent crime. Minneapolis has been the focal point in the country since May 25th, following George Floyd's death while in police custody. The city has been ravaged by protests, riots. Words matter, by the way. Ravaged by riots, and there was early momentum to abolish the city's police force. But since Floyd's death, some residents have complained of slower than usual police responses, and at times no response at all, according to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Remember I talked about that Greenfield incident? And we're monitoring it. Story goes on to say, police murdered a man in our neighborhood, and they all just fell out and left us alone to figure out on our own as far as protecting our neighborhoods, one resident told the paper. You feel isolated, like you're in a war zone sometimes, but there's no one to help us. Remember I said when the police back off, the social order collapses? That's what I'm talking about. KTSP.com reported that police in the city offered a list to help residents navigate the increase in crimes. Listen to this, folks. Listen to this. Some of the examples on the list include carry only items you need and carry less cash. Be prepared to give up your cell phone and purse or wallet. Don't fight with criminals. Remember, your safety is most important. What the hell kind of quality of life is that? Complete resignation to the crook. Just like the crook says, give it up. You may recall, you may have forgotten, time flies. I issued a public safety message when I was the sheriff of Milwaukee County in response to an increase in home invasion burglaries. Here's the message I had for the residents of Milwaukee County.
I'm Sheriff David Clarke, and I want to talk to you about something personal, your safety. It's no longer a spectator sport. I need you in the game. But are you ready? With officers laid off and furloughed, simply calling 911 and waiting is no longer your best option. You could beg for mercy from a violent criminal, hide under the bed, or you can fight back. But are you prepared? Consider taking a certified safety course in handling a firearm so you can defend yourself until we get there. You have a duty to protect yourself and your family. We're partners now. Can I count on you?
This safety message brought to you by the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
Does that sound in any way, shape, or form to the Minneapolis Police Department's message to residents to protect themselves? Give up your cash, give up, capitulate, fall down, just surrender. Now, let's be very clear, because I get asked this stuff a lot. You know, Sheriff, what should we do in these situations? And you know, my answer is, it depends. It's easy for me to say, hey, you know, fight back, do all these things. But it depends on what you're dealing with at that time, at that moment in time. But here's what goes on in real life. The first thing you're going to do is panic. All of a sudden you feel something getting stuck in your ribs, or you're looking down the barrel of a gun. You are going to need a change of underwear. Very intimidating, very frightening. But you got to fight through the panic. In your head. You got to collect your thoughts, and you got to figure out, what are my options here? Now, I said, let's be very clear. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just give up your wallet. I said sometimes. But if you're prepared, and you notice that message? Maybe we need to listen to it again. Play that again. Listen to the message.
I'm Sheriff David Clarke, and I want to talk to you about something personal, your safety. It's no longer a spectator sport. I need you in the game. But are you ready? With officers laid off and furloughed, simply calling 911 and waiting is no longer your best option. You can beg for mercy from a violent criminal, hide under the bed, or you can fight back. But are you prepared? Consider taking a certified safety course in handling a firearm so you can defend yourself until we get there. You have a duty to protect yourself and your family. We're partners now. Can I count on you?
This safety message brought to you by the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. Let's break that down a little bit further. You remember I got pilloried for that? I mean, I just got eviscerated by the left, by the anti-gun ninnies, by the Democrat politicians. I got eviscerated. And you know what? I did not give a damn. I have responsibility to assist people and what to think about. Remember I said, are you prepared? And that's what I mean when I say it depends. Are you prepared for something like this? If you're a CCW holder, that in and of itself is not enough. Because you can't recreate the anxiety, the panic, the shock that you're going to fear. You have to recover from that as quickly as you can so that your mind can think, okay, what do I got here? All right. He says he has a gun, but he's not showing it to me. All right. Might be time for you to reach for yours. Now, if you got the gun up against your forehead or your ribs, different story. But you got to think about these things ahead of time. What would I do? How would I react? And, you know, there's too many people with their CCW carrying concealed weapon permit, and you don't practice. It's human nature. You go out, you practice just enough to get it, and then you're kind of done with it. And you don't have to shoot with precision. See, there's a difference between tactical shooting and target shooting. Target shooting, you're shooting for score. Tactical shooting, you want to hit center mass. You want to hit vital organs to knock the threat down or to stop the threat. You don't do that so much in target shooting. So people stand there in the bay at the gun range and they're shooting, trying to get a nice tight, they call it a nice tight pattern of the shots that you put out there. Doesn't matter. I tell people, pull that damn gun, point the barrel, center mass, and fire. Center mass. You're going to hit something. Okay? Hopefully. Because when you're under anxiety, and you can't recreate that at the gun range. You cannot recreate anxiety. And this is what I mean when I say, are you prepared? You have to think about these things today. Not when it happens, it's too late. You know, the first thing out of people's mouths when you get sent to a robbery situation or even like a burglary, if it's in progress, you know, the first words out of people's mouth, it happened so fast, officer, I don't remember. And it does. I get that. It happens real fast. What happens is the brain can't function under that speed and it shuts down. It overloads the thought process. But like I said, you have to recover from that very quickly. But I'll tell you what, as a law enforcement executive, there's no way I could sit up there and tell my residents, give it up. I sound like the holdup man. Give it up. Give up your money. Give up this. Fall on the ground. And like I said, in some situations, that may be the best course of action, but it isn't in all situations. But if you're not ready, you know what? I don't care. People like to ask me, what kind of gun do you suggest or what caliber? It doesn't matter. It does. You know what I tell them when I get asked that? What's your favorite firearm? I said the one that actually fires when I pull the trigger. Because if you're talking about a semi-automatic, those are all the ones I have. I have a couple of revolvers. It may misfire. It may get a malfunction. And then it's, you know what? You might as well just throw it at the perpetrator. Maybe you can startle them. So I say the one that fires when I pull the trigger. Yeah, I prefer a higher caliber. 40. 9s are good. 9mm, that's enough. That's enough stopping power. 38, you like the revolver. That's okay. 22, a little too small. 45, yes, but if you can't handle that recoil, don't bother with it. But the point is, think about these things ahead of time. But in Minneapolis, they're saying, you know what? There's nothing we can do for you. You are on your own. Prepare to get robbed. And I ask, what kind of quality of life is that? But now, you know, the Minneapolis city council, they appear to be backpedaling from their abolishing the police. They're seeing these crime rates rise, seeing people being victimized. Here's another thing I get asked about. You know, at these riots, a tactic used by the rioters is to surround your vehicle, right? People ask me, what should I do? My answer is, it depends. Okay, and I can't give you this, you know, cheat sheet, say do these 3-4 things, A, B, C. It doesn't work like that. But I also tell them this, here's what I would do. I don't know what you should do. You'll never hear me say that because I don't know what what your circumstances are at that moment. And they're all different. So anybody who tells you, well, I would do this, you know, okay, you might, and that's okay. But I've already thought about this. Remember I said, are you prepared? Folks, I've already played this out in my mind. If these idiots surround my vehicle, the first thing you should do is if you're driving down the street, don't stop. You might have to slow down, but don't, you know, you don't want, nobody wants to run anybody over. But don't stop. Just slow down and keep the car moving. Even if it's just rolling at, you know, you take your foot off the brake, you know, the car will move. Because these people are going to get out of your way. If you keep that car moving. I did not say pedal to the metal. Keep the car moving. They'll get out from in front of it. They may still hang on the side, but they'll get out from in front of it. You want to get out of there. So keep the car moving. Do not stop. And for sure, do not get out of that vehicle. That vehicle offers you protection. Stay in the car. Keep the doors locked. Don't roll I've seen people roll the window down. They start shouting at the rider. Do not do that. You will get pulled out of that car and beaten. They've already demonstrated they will do that. So keep the car rolling. This is what I would do. I'm going to keep my car rolling. You get out of the street is what I'm signaling. The street belongs to cars. I am driving. You are, as a matter of fact, the way I look at it, that's false imprisonment. You're prohibiting me from going where I want to go. That is false imprisonment. That is a felony in this state. So they are committing a felony on me. So I have the right to defend myself. Reasonably. You have to be reasonable. That's why I said you can't just gun the car and say, well, I got scared. But keep the car rolling. They'll get out of the way. Now, there are some that won't. Well, keep the car rolling. And as soon as the last one gets out of the way, then gun it, okay? But here's another thing. This is what I would do. You're not going to start banging on the car, pounding on the car. Okay, well, I don't like that, but that's not a deadly force situation. But I'll tell you what, as soon as a window breaks, all bets are off. It's reasonable for me to assume you smash the window, you're trying to get inside, and you're going to do me harm. Okay? Then you can floor it. Or if you're armed, like I always am, once the window smashes, if I see a hand reach in there, all bets are off. It's reasonable to assume that when they go to that length, they're going to do you harm. And you have the right to respond reasonably. Okay? I'm just telling you that's what I would do. But here's where we're at in this country in terms of lack of a police response, little police response times delayed. You could be in the middle of this situation. Here's a 911 call where it actually happened. You know, one of these surrounding the car actually happened. Listen to the police dispatcher. Play that.
Fredericksburg 911, where's your emergency?
Hi, I'm in downtown. The protestors are blocking.
Which street?
Right at Caroline.
Or do you see any businesses? Okay.
Yeah, and they're gesturing and they're blocking.
The city has sanctioned their protest, so we just have officers that can only monitor it. They can't do anything about it, but we recommend that
they're blocking get out.
Yeah, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to do that per city hall. So we would suggest that you report this to city hall and make a complaint there, and that way they can do something about it. Because right now they told our officers that we can't do anything about it.
How do I get out of here? I can't go backwards.
Yeah, I can't. Unless you're hurt or something or getting in an accident, our officers can't intervene and move.
I can't sit here all night, ma'am. You cannot do. I have a little girl in the car. You can't do that.
You just have to slowly get through the protest. I can't.
Okay, am I going to get arrested when I keep going? Because they're gesturing at my car.
As long as you don't hit any people, like, you're not allowed to hit people.
Well, I will.
Like,
I absolutely will, and I need to get out of here.
Okay, ma'am, you cannot hit people.
They're on my car, right? They're on my car right now.
But we would suggest you slowly drive through the area. Don't hit anyone with your vehicle and report this to the city.
I cannot get out of here, okay?
You have to be patient, but I'll let the officers know, okay?
Are you serious?
The city
guys
told us
cannot...
that we can't do anything, ma'am. The city told us that this is a sanctioned event.
That they're blocking people getting through to get out.
Yes, ma'am. The city's allowed that. We can't do anything about that. The police can't. So we're all very frustrated about this.
Get out of my car. You know, this is going to get dangerous. I got a kid here.
Yes, ma'am. We would suggest that you call up City Hall to let them know about your frustrations, because we're all very frustrated.
This is getting scary. I cannot do
or if you can do like a side road or something, but yeah, there's nothing the officers can do to get them out.
Get out of here, okay? Get out of the way. This is insane. Oh, they're on my car. They're on my car.
What kind of car are you in, ma'am?
No difference is happening.
Get out.
Ma'am, are they actually sitting on or standing on your car right now?
They're on my car right now.
What kind of vehicle are you in?
I'm in a black Highlander.
All right, I'm going to let the officers know about that, okay? Hold on just a moment.
And I got a little girl in the car crying. Are you kidding me?
And your name real quick, ma'am, just for our records?
This is insane.
Okay. Sure, thank you.
I'm out of it now. I just had...
Okay, you're out of there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, okay?
Can you believe that? Do you hear the panic and anxiety in her? And that's what happens, okay? And she's got a little kid in the car. Can you believe that police departments are doing this to people? And you know what? In fairness to the officers, these are the orders they're getting from their failed leadership or lack of leadership. Your police commanders with stand-down orders at riots. Cops are getting pelted with rocks and bricks and bottles, and they're told to stand down. Stand down. This is what we're doing to people, not just the police, but this is what we're doing to citizens. Basically, you're on your own. And that's why I said today, you better start thinking about this stuff now. What will I do? And run through the different scenarios. Asking these foolish questions. What kind of car are you in? Oh, what are they? Oh, who the hell cares? And she said, I can't move. They had her trapped. That's false imprisonment. So you have these riots where cops are told to just watch the property damage occur, absorb the abuse. You ever have someone throw a brick at you? Or even a rock? That can cause serious bodily harm. And they should be responding with deadly force. And they can't even use tear gas? They can't even use pepper spray? They can't advance? Retreat? I heard in Portland last weekend, the officers were in retreat. Retreat? That's not effective. The police need to be advancing and utilizing all of the resources they have, the rubber bullets. And here they're passing ordinances in Seattle and Portland and other cities, Milwaukee, prohibiting the use of tear gas and rubber bullets. And the beanbags, the beanbag thing comes out like a bazooka. It hurt. That stuff hurt. Not likely to cause death. But it'll get your attention. And they're telling the police they can't use that? You have got to be kidding me. You know how we used to handle riots? Let's go back in time here. This is Ronald Reagan, governor of California at the time. You know, back then you had a lot of the rioting going on college campuses. It was over war demonstrations, whatnot. He's the governor of California. Listen to this news report and listen to how Ronald Reagan handled this stuff.
At Berkeley, there was a plot of land that had been taken by protesters. The university owned it. They were trying to turn it into a parking lot. The protesters claimed it as a park for the people.
Reagan orders the California Highway Patrol and Berkeley police officers to the park. While the crowd continues to swell, Reagan's chief of staff sends reinforcements to the scene. He tells them to use whatever methods they choose against the protesters. Not long after, police start firing buckshot and tear gas. One student is killed, and an estimated 128 people are admitted to local hospitals. Reagan declares a state of emergency and sends in the National Guard.
He was attempting to crack down on student protesters. You know, depending on your political point of view, he was either successful in doing so or he was authoritarian.
Those people told you for days in advance that if the university sought to go ahead with that construction, they were going to physically destroy the university. Now, why did you
negotiate many times?
Negotiate? What is to negotiate? What is?
The university is a public institution.
That's right. But the university,
its own community, and for the community of Berkeley that live around it.
All of it began the first time some of you who know better and are old enough to know better let young people think that they had the right to choose the laws they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest.
These were quite controversial moves, but it helped solidify a base for him. And he won re-election by a good margin.
Effective leadership. That's what it sounds like, and that's what it looks like. We don't have people like that anymore. In the state houses, in these mayor's offices, we don't have effective leadership. We don't have bold leadership. These were riots. You heard the casualties that the rioters were taking on. They keep calling them protesters. Those were riot makers. Now the casualties are all on the side of the police. Every time you see this stuff in Portland, you hear, here's this thing here: 47 police officers injured in rioting. Union says. Here's another one that says more than 700 officers in 24 states were attacked, most of them likely injured, in riots across the nation over the past few weeks. Most of the attacks involved rioters throwing bricks and rocks at officers, while officers were hit with bats or had Molotov cocktails thrown at them. These aren't protests. This stuff is dangerous. And I think in some of these cases, the use of deadly force is justified. And it would send a message. Here, listen to this headline. Atlanta protesters embedded nails into fireworks. Here's another one. Portland sees 150 round shooting at an apartment building as crowds continue violent clashes with police. And what does their leadership do? What kind of leadership do we get today? Political and law enforcement? Stand down. Just absorb the beating. Maybe they'll go away. Well, they just, they have the right to protest. Where's Ronald Reagan when you need him? And again, where's David Clarke when you need him? News Talk 1130 WISN. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. Did you know that the Atlanta mayor, this woman who's been talked about as potential Biden VP candidate, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, she's a racist? Looking at the story here from the Blaze, it says Atlanta mayor bans teens selling water on street corners after 18-year-old shot dead. Now she's being accused of racism. The mayor of Atlanta is being accused of racism for banning teens from selling bottled water on the street after an 18-year-old was shot dead. More cultural rot here. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms joined in an effort with the Atlanta Police Department to curb sales of water bottles by the water boys and cited the rise in violent confrontations as a reason. Quote from her, "We appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit of youth who are selling water to motorists," said Mayor Bottoms in the statement, "but we have seen an increase in unsafe and violent activity in some locations and cannot allow it to continue." As he goes into all this other nonsense, it's going to take a village, and we're working with partners, blah, blah, blah. $10 would cost Jelani his life. Jelani Pless. 18 was trying to sell water bottles on the street at the time. Plus was shot and killed. He's killed over a $10 bill. See what I mean when I talk about cultural rot and dysfunction? Killing somebody over a $10 bill. According to their account, the teen was selling a bottle of water to a motorist when a teenager with another group selling water got angry with the competition. Can you imagine this? I mean, you have to because it happened. After a physical altercation, the teen allegedly returned with a gun and gunned down Pless. $10. $10. This is the cultural rot that I talk about. Settling disputes with firearms. This is not a gun control issue. It's a cultural rot and cultural dysfunction issue. So now the mayor of Atlanta is a racist. Said. Did you know that Bill de Blasio, here's an example of black privilege and black superiority. Bill de Blasio reveals the city skipped over the permitting process to paint Black Lives Matter street art. You know that thing where they painted in the street before Trump Tower, Black Lives Matter in the street? Well, it required a permit to do it. And the mayor, he said he skipped over the permitting process used by people who wish to create street art when it painted Black Lives Matter outside Trump Tower. Quote from him, "That is something that, again, transcends all normal realities because we are in a moment of history when that had to be said and done. That's a decision I made," he said at a news conference. "We haven't said no to people. We've said if you want to apply, you can apply, but there's a process." He was asked about the process the city went through before it painted the artwork, and he said, "We didn't do any. The normal process continues, however, for anyone who wants to apply." So in other words, it's okay for them to skip the process, but not okay for others. Since then, the Black Lives artwork has been vandalized multiple times, and the mayor called the vandalism unacceptable. Well, that's a response to, you know what? It's a protest. Just call it protest. Don't call it vandalism. It's protest. Man, what a world we live in right now. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is a Mark Belling late afternoon show. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling late afternoon show. A couple things I want to get to before the end of the show. Let's talk a little bit about Black Lives Matter. There's a bunch of stuff here I didn't get to that I wanted to, but that's the goal. Have more than you need. Anyway, remember when Nadler, Congressman Nadler, Representative Nadler from California, said that the violence going on in Portland, Oregon was a myth, the rioting? You know, these people know no shame on the left. They just throw stuff out there and you know, they smile like we're stupid and we don't know what the heck is going on. So he calls the rioting going on in Portland a myth. Well, there's a story I have here from a guy, Ken Blackwell. He's an advisor to the Family Research Council. He's a member of the policy board of the American Constitutional Rights Union, former mayor of Cincinnati. And he penned an article and talk about myth. It says, Black Lives Matter popularity is a politically motivated myth. The supposed popularity of Black Lives Matter, Inc. is a complete fantasy, willfully repeated ad nauseum by the left and the media, that is distorting public discourse around the wave of radicalism that has ravaged our cities this summer. Mainstream polls ostensibly show striking levels of support for Black Lives Matter, up to 63% of respondents in one recent survey. In another poll, 60% said they support the ideas of the Black Lives Matter movement. Predictably, the liberal press have hailed these surveys as proof of a massive shift in public opinion since the first wave of BLM activism in 2014 and 2015. If you recall, that was after Ferguson, Missouri, and Mike Brown, who tried to disarm a law enforcement officer. Some go as far as to interpret these numbers as public support for the mostly peaceful protesters attacking public monuments and assaulting police. Joe Biden's handlers see it as a mandate to go all in on a racially divisive anti-police campaign strategy. There's one problem. The entire premise is nonsense. Further polling makes perfectly clear that many of the people who tell pollsters they support Black Lives Matter have no idea what they're saying. Americans, like all civilized people, believe that black people have a right not to be killed. In the extraordinarily rare circumstances, let me repeat that. In the extraordinarily rare circumstance when police officers unjustifiably kill black Americans, the public has always believed that the victims' lives matter. But that's not really what Black Lives Matter, a for-profit organization founded by Marxists and funded by an outfit with a convicted domestic terrorist on the board, stands for. That's not what the wider assortment of street radicals waving the Black Lives Matter banner stand for either. When you ask Americans about the things BLM does stand for, you get a picture of a very different from the glowing support they now claim. Only 15% of respondents in a recent Gallup poll want to scrap the police. A Pew survey indicated that more Americans supported increasing funding to the police than supported decreasing funding to the institution. Those are essential aims of the BLM protests. So much so that when Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser had city workers paint a Black Lives Matter mural near the White House to show her support for the movement, activists quickly added, defund the police and chastise her for leaving that out in the first place. The same phenomena is evident with respect to the other central BLM goals. Only 1 in 5 Americans, for instance, believe in handing out reparations to the descendants of slaves, another core BLM aim. And no pollsters, to my knowledge, have even bothered asking about BLM's even more absurd positions, such as a guaranteed minimum income only for blacks, ending prisons, abolishing private schools, and dismantling the nuclear family. The biggest problem with the stark disparity between perception and reality is that Joe Biden is trying to exploit it for political gain. He and his campaign are trying to keep the dissonance and division going as long as possible, parroting the popular Black Lives Matter slogan and then shrinking into denials and reproachment every time it would actually be necessary to take a stand for any of the ludicrous policy proposals hiding behind it, even to the point of having the media cover for him when he steps over the line into supporting proposals that BLM actually advocates, such as defunding the police. It's a cynical ploy to cast President Trump as out of step when, in fact, a large chunk of Americans believe that, if anything, President Trump has not gone far enough in cracking down on the violent protests and riots. They say there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. The notion of an overwhelmingly popular BLM movement is nothing but a statistic being peddled by professional liars. Again, that's Ken Blackwell, former mayor of Cincinnati, Ohio, and he's on the board of the American Constitutional Rights Union. Contest. Text the word LOVE, L-O-V-E, to 200-200. You'll get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio information. Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. Let's stick on the Black Lives Matter for a second here, closing out the show. Here's a former Black Panther chairwoman who says Black Lives Matter has a plantation mentality. It's a pretty good smackdown. Elaine Brown doesn't understand what BLM does. The former chairwoman of the Black Panther Party isn't fond of the Black Lives Matter movement. Elaine Brown believes that BLM and its hands up, don't shoot slogan reflects a plantation mentality. That's pretty good smackdown here. In an interview on a UK news site, Brown said she doesn't know what Black Lives Matter does and therefore cannot compare it to the Black Panther Party. Quote, I know what the Black Panther Party was, explained Brown. I know the lives we lost, the struggle we put into place, the efforts we made to assaults by the government and police. I know that. I don't know what Black Lives Matter does, so if you can tell me, I'll give you my thoughts. Basically, she's saying they do nothing. Rabble-rousers is all they are. Brown also stated that the new generation of young people complaining and protesting about the murder of young black men and women by police have no other plans beyond public protests. They're just out marching around. She goes on to say, to me, this is a plantation mentality. It smacks of master if you would just treat me right. And it has nothing to do with self-determination, empowerment, a sense of justice, or anything else. And then she goes on to give some of her takes there. So basically what she's saying is these people couldn't even carry water for the Black Panthers. Most of these young goofs walking around out there, if they ever saw the likes of a Huey Newton or Stokely Carmichael, they would probably pee their pants in fear. Anyway, we're going to end with this, and I have to address this. It's this issue about President Trump not going to the funeral of John Lewis. And, you know, the left are going to make a big deal about everything, so it's not that big a deal. First of all, I don't know why President Trump would attend the funeral of John Lewis. Those two didn't like each other. I don't know about you, but I don't go to funerals of people I don't like. And all that funeral was, just like many when these notable people die, it's just a self-serving exercise for people to attend and get up there and blather with their eulogies, so on and so forth. Barack Obama attended and turned it into a political rally, a get-out-the-vote rally. But I don't know why it's a big deal that President Trump didn't go to John. John Lewis spent a lot of time attacking President Trump, and that's what goes on in the political environment. That's no big deal. But, you know, to think that he should then attend the funeral, it just would have looked phony to me. So the president was asked about it. This is from a Washington Post column. And it says, I don't know John Lewis. Trump bashes deceased civil rights leader for skipping his inauguration. He didn't bash him. And it goes on in here to say, it says, asked by interviewer Jonathan Swan how history would remember Lewis's contributions to the nation, Trump demurred. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis, Trump said in an Axios HBO interview. He chose not to come to my inauguration. Pressed by Swan on whether he found Lewis impressive, Trump was likewise noncommittal. I can't say one word or another, Trump said, before noting again that Lewis had skipped his inauguration in his State of the Union speeches, adding, nobody has done more for black Americans than I have. He should have come. I think it was a big mistake. Good for Trump. You know, the one thing I like about him is he is not afraid to poke back. He will poke the left in the eye with a sharp object every chance he gets. All they do is attack him. And he fights back. I like it. Let me say this about John Lewis. And I remember I was doing a Fox and Friends interview one Saturday morning in the panel there, and I can't remember who the woman was. She's not there anymore, but she asked me about, this is when Trump and Lewis were feuding, and Trump was bringing up the fact that his congressional district, it's in the Atlanta area, was falling apart. A lot of urban decay, horrible schools, high unemployment, high crime, and Trump pointed that out. And he really shut John Lewis down because John Lewis didn't have a comeback. But, you know, let me say this about John Lewis. John Lewis, yeah, back during the civil rights marches, 50s and 60s, yeah, he was there, but, you know, he wasn't leading it. That was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., okay? So he was a hanger-on. And I'm not going to take anything away from him on that aspect. He was in the civil rights fight. That was 60 years ago. Since John Lewis has been in Congress, I challenge anybody listening or anybody you might ask, name one significant public policy change or proposal that John Lewis has led in his 40-plus years in Congress. Name one where he authored a bill and ushered it through the Congress to passage where it became legislation signed by a president. He doesn't have any. John Lewis has been resting on his laurels in Congress for the last 40 years. Alan West did a column. Alan West, when he was in Congress, he was part of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but there was a story done by the New York Times that was very critical of the Congressional Black Caucus, of which John Lewis was a member. And basically, they were chided for their extravagant spending. They raised a lot of money. Okay, there was a lot of money raised by the Congressional Black Caucus and then just given to the Democrat Party. But anyway, here's West's experience. There were other memories that were not so fond, such as the extravagant spending for lunches. I remember the time when the CBC lunch rotation fell to me. This is Alan West. And it wasn't going to be any Maryland seafood. Instead, we ordered Chick-fil-A, and there was not a single crumb left. It was hilarious when another Florida representative, Alcee Hastings, he's from Florida, the congressman from Florida, complained to some news reporter. The lesson learned from the conscience of the Congress, more like the convicts of the Congress, such as Cold Cash Jesse Jackson Jr., and of late Chakafata and Corrine Scott Brown, is that extravagance was modus operandi for this Congressional Black Caucus. Sadly, the constituents of the CBC are rarely privileged to such exquisite living. And apparently it's still going on. So this was a New York Times that did this inquiry and was highly critical of the lavish spending. Here's an example. The PAC, the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, spent hundreds of thousands throughout the 2016 election cycle on administrative expenses that included bills for lavish trips that were paid by the committee. A $5,000 payment was made in January of 2016 from the PAC to the Buccaneer Hotel located in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, one of the world's top 50 tropical resorts. Later in March of 2016, the PAC made another payment to a resort in the Virgin Islands. This time the money went toward a stay at a one-of-a-kind Renaissance St. Croix Carambola Beach Resort and Spa located in St. Croix. The Renaissance is situated among the foothills of a lush tropical rainforest and only steps away from the pristine estate of Davis Bay. The point is, John Lewis has been living high off the hog in the last 40 years in Congress. And I'm not going to diminish his fight during the 60s and the 50s for civil rights. It was over a half century ago. We live in a what have you done for me now culture in the United States. And that's why I said you name one public policy proposal of change authored by John Lewis. You won't find one. News Talk 1130 WISN. David Clarke in for Mark Belling. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show. Enjoy your evening and God bless.